How's everybody doing? Hey! Give me a G. Give me an A. Give me an R. Give me a Y. What's it spell? Don't try to stop me, Shmee.
I'm sorry I'm late, but
Oh, you're right on time.
yeah, I ran into a Nephilim.
And then what happened?
His name was Andy Woods. He was so tall. He was like 6 feet 8 inches tall. All right, and we are here. Speaking of Nephilim, we are here to talk about a serious subject that has not been taken seriously, I think, in the way that it should. We are, I think, living in an age when the lid is coming off of what used to be called arcane knowledge. And now we're beginning to be able to read Scripture in such a way that we understand the dark side. And I believe the reason for that is because we're coming close to a juncture of some sort. And Timothy and L.A. have, each one of them has reached out, I think, at the leading of the Lord. And I've talked with them both, and that's by sense that you are led of the Lord, to bring light to the subject that has sort of been covered up for millennia and is now coming open again. And because of that, the Lord's raised up people like L.A. and like Timothy. So having said that, what do we want to do, gentlemen? Would you like to make a statement of some sort, and then we'll take questions?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to go to Tim over here. Have you seen Tim's DVDs, by the way? Yeah, he goes places I would not go. And you can't. Reverb. Okay. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. I ran out of cord, which is why I couldn't pull this mic up now. I'm supposed. We have, I think, reached a point where it's time to begin to discuss these subjects in ways we never have before. And Tim, having said that, what are you doing? What are you being led to discover?
Well, we are right now involved in several very interesting projects at Gen 6 Productions. This is kind of a secret, but I'll tell you anyway. I'm going to be in the Solomon Islands in Papua New Guinea, coming up here shortly. And we're tracking some very intense things, very, very intense things. And getting closer. I think LA would probably say the same thing. We feel like we're getting closer and closer to hard proof of the existence of giants and other things. So we've got all kinds of things in the works.
And speaking of hard proof, and you really rang a bell with me. I want you got to get up close to this thing, right? Wait a minute.
Switch mics.
Aha! There it is. Ooh, that's much better.
Good.
I think this is really important. Speaking of hard proof, which is a statement there or a phrase that you used. What I really want to talk about right up front, and I want to start with you. Still, this microphone, but you have to eat the mic. Wow. All right. Sorry, folks. I really deeply apologize. The word hard proof that Tim used a moment ago, something I really want to talk about because I've heard L.A. over the years say that everywhere he goes, he's just a little bit behind some people that have come in and destroyed the evidence that would corroborate what he's looking for. Talk about this whole movement, this conspiracy.
I mean, it really is a conspiracy because, for instance, there was an undisclosed location, and Fritz Zimmerman went there and discovered that in 2002, in a mound in somewhere in the Midwest, they took out a couple of 10-footers. And he went to the site. It's covered with a barbed wire fence all the way around it, and the mound is the same thing. It's got razor wire on it. We know they're there. We all know that they're there. We also know that Native Americans could take us right now to a burial ground where we could. I know of one where there's at least a 10-footer, but it's on Native American land, First Nation land. And we protocoled the chief, we protocoled the medicine man up there. We spent time, we wrote a formal letter, and they wouldn't even have the courtesy to write back, because we're white guys, what can I tell you? But even with Chief Joseph, who's a Taino tribe, you just can't crack the door. They know where it is. They could take us there. And Steve and Tim are doing the same thing we're doing. We're following every lead that comes through to try to find out where, if we can get permission, and there's only a few states where you can do it. For instance, in Utah, we went to Utah, we spent a lot of time talking to people that knew of places, same thing. But you can't go there because of NAGPRA, Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, which means if you even, desecrate anything unintentionally, you can be looking at fines and imprisonment. Not the case in Ohio, which is why we focus on Ohio. Because in Ohio, you can dig if the mound is on your own property. But if you hit human bones, you've got to call the coroner. The coroner will come out and go, it's ancient. Then the university comes out. And at that point, this is why we have 2 archaeologists on the team. Because we know that they're going to want to take everything. We're going to go, no, this is our dig, and we'll do it right, and that's the deal. So we are on the trail. And we've been funded by one particular person, and other people contribute. But if any of you are rolling in millions of dollars and want to help fund this thing, great, because it costs a lot. I don't take a nickel from the funding, but I will pay for airfare and lodging. But the people that we have get paid.
Now, watching Tim in his explorations on his DVD series, and by the way, it's phenomenal, and I appreciate it. But again, in your DVDs, one of the things, I think maybe the thing that impressed me most was you really document the work of this group of people trying to destroy the evidence of the old world. Talk about that.
Well, in our first film, Technology of the Fallen, I was in Peru with the film crew. And while I was there, I had heard about historical accounts of giants in Peru. And I met with a archaeologist, a very well-known archaeologist. De la Vega is his last name, De la Vega. And he actually speaks in Washington, D.C., and he's an official representative of the Peruvian Archaeological Society. And I met with him in Puno, near Lake Titicaca, and I asked him if there were historical records, historical accounts of giants. And when I say historical, I mean that the same history from which we derive the conquest of Peru. And he said there were. And so he said, I'll get back to you. And a couple days later, he showed up to my hotel with a disc. And all the archaeologists in Peru and historians have access to the historical library. It's all digitized now in Peru. But also you can, if you have special access, you can actually go into the library of all the history of the conquest of Peru. The old books, the original books are still there, but they've been digitized, and all of the archaeologists have access to them, the university level archaeologists. So he went in and he did a search for me, and he came back and he gave me this disc, and it was all these documents from the most famous chroniclers, Bernabé Cobo, Antonio de la Calancha, all the main people. And he had highlighted many of the cases in which these guys are talking about giants. Of course, all of these instances have been excised from the history books, but they're right there. Literally, you'll have pieces of a story that show up in all the major textbooks across the United States concerning the world, concerning the conquest of Peru. And right in the middle are these stories about giants, the bones of giants that were discovered by the chroniclers, by the conquistadors themselves. Of course, the conquistadors with Francisco Pizarro, when they moved into Peru, when they conquered the Incan Empire, they were finding the bones of giants everywhere. And in fact, in one case, if you've seen Technology of the Fall, and we talk about this instance, Pizarro and some of his men were traveling across Peru, and they came upon a ravine where the water had washed away part of the shoreline of the river. And what they discovered was a massive sepulcher of a giant. And the giant was laying there, and this is a skeleton of a giant. And the head was so large, we're not talking about some random shin bone or something. The head was so large that the conquistadors thrust their rapiers through the eye socket. It was so large that the tip of their blade barely touched the back of the inner cranium. So you're talking about that big. This is in the historical record, right there next to all the other stuff that made it into the history books. And there's just dozens and dozens of accounts of giants. In one case, and I believe this was recorded by Antonio de la Calancha, in which they were there were clergymen, and then there were also visitadores, who were official representatives from the Crown of Spain, who were in Peru with the conquistadors, because a fifth of the gold always had to be apportioned for the crown first. So you had the presence of the crown and these official scribes from Spain, and then you had the presence of the Catholic Church via the priests, and they were there recording everything. And the priests were there to extirpate idolatry in Peru, to exterminate it. And in one case, they went and they found, in a certain area of Peru, they found this cave. The natives were worshiping something in the cave. And they were there to get rid of all the idols. So they went into the cave. What did they find in the cave? 3 giants enthroned, 3 dead giants enthroned, dressed in cumbia. Cumbia is the ceremonial cloth from the Inca.
Unbelievable.
3 giants dressed in cumbia. This is in the historical record. The natives are worshiping them, and there's all kinds of dead bodies around. So they're killing human sacrifice. And it's in the record. What did they do with it? Both the clergy and the visitadores, the official representatives from Spain, they took the bodies out of the cave and they burned them in the village, along with the rest of the idols that the Indians were worshiping. And why were the Indians worshiping the giants? Because they believed they were their divine progenitors in the historical accounts. So people say, where's the proof of giants? How come they're not in the historical accounts? They are. They've just been excised from the history books. So fascinating stuff.
Now, there's another aspect to giant, and I want LA to talk about it, because there were giants that maybe were not as big as the one Tim was describing, but they were weird-looking people. And LA has photographed and studied some odd-looking skulls.
Yes.
That obviously not human, in my opinion.
These are the Paracas elongated skulls, and there's a sort of a kerfuffle in academia, because some people believe that everything is cradle headboarded, and we've demonstrated by our research that, okay, some of the skulls are cradle headboarded. Cradle headboarding is when you take an infant and you bind the child's head, and you can get a cone head shape. You can change the shape of the skull. The problem is, and I showed this on Friday during the talk, you can't move the foramen magnum. The spinal column comes up like this and attaches to the skull, the center of the skull. And that part right there is called the foramen magnum. And the foramen magnum on all the Paracas skulls that we've seen is pushed as far back as you can get it. If it's any further back to the back of a skull, it's outside the skull. If you remember when I showed that thing on Friday, for those, how many saw that clip? That's the huge skull from the Chongos, and we got to handle that thing. It was unbelievable. And when she turns it upside down, I go, oh my gosh, I'm exasperated. It's all the way in the back, because it is. It's all the way in the back of a skull, and that's genetic, and it shouldn't be there, but it's there. And our hypothesis has been that 3,500 years ago, when Joshua and Caleb are pressing the conquest of Canaan, the Nephilim tribes are there. And again, this is conjecture. We don't know, because no one really talks about it. Even in extra biblical works like Josephus just talks about the Nephilim had countenances so large and different from any other, and voices so terrible. But he doesn't. We think that the Emim, the Zanzumim, the Nephilim, the Raphaim, the Anakim may denote certain genetic characteristics, because the Anakim means long necks. It does mean that. When you break it down from the Hebrew, it means long necks. Another one is the terrible ones. So is that denoting some sort of genetic characteristics? And what we've discovered from chiropractors and medical doctors and osteologists who have looked at the Paracas skull and the placement of the foramen magnum, it's conjecture, believe that perhaps these entities had much longer necks. They're not giants. They're probably, 6 feet tall, whatever. They're not giants. But something is going on here, and there's enough difference in the Paracas skulls. And by the way, all the DNA evidence that we've gotten so far, most of it shows a Middle Eastern or a European ancestry in the mitochondrial DNA, the haplogroup, which comes from the mother's side. We have not been able to get nuclear DNA, which is really frustrating, because until we get nuclear DNA, we don't know what we're really looking at. But the mitochondria points to a Middle Eastern or European ancestry. That rewrites history. And immediately academia and the scientific community, it must be contamination. They don't know what they're doing. But they've never contacted us, not realizing that we have an archaeologist. We work with 2 labs. I mean, it's a scientific, it's all on film. We're dressed from head to toe in lab gear with masks and double gloves, the whole deal. You can't make it. You can't collect samples better than what we did, in my opinion, unless you're in a sterile atmosphere. So there you go.
Where's this all going? And again, I want to take questions. If there's some questions out here that you consider burning questions in just a moment, where is this headed for, as a matter of fact? Oh, thank you very much. This is my wife, Doris.
Let's give her a hand, folks. Yay! Da, 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 da.
She, without whom I would be absolutely worthless. And the Lord gave her to me many years ago, and what a blessing. But that's a side issue. Back to the issue at hand. What's happening right now? Why is all this popping up? Because clearly it is. 50 years ago, all was quiet. But suddenly now, the Lord, I think the Spirit of the Lord is pushing to lay this open, to reveal it. What's going to come out of this?
Well, I think everything that's hidden is going to be revealed before the end. And because God doesn't leave his people without knowledge to deal with what's happening on the earth. And all of this has to do with, and I think you gentlemen would agree, with the deception that's coming. And so we're preempting that deception with the truth. And we're getting in front of it, and all of our research is leading to the same reality, to the same point, which is that there is a lie that has been fabricated and that will grow as time progresses. And the only defense against a lie is the truth. And so that's what motivates us. And I think it all has to do intrinsically with, it's all connected with the alien question, the UFOs, with the abductions, with the other entities that are allegedly living beneath the earth, with the Vatican. It's all interconnected.
I agree.
The deeper you penetrate, you find that there's a singular source for all of this.
I hate to bring up something so mundane, but I remember Indiana Jones and the legend of the crystal skulls. And there you had elongated skulls made of crystal. You had a UFO that took off.
In South America.
In South America.
Yep.
And who put that together? What did they know? Who wrote that script?
And they were in Peru in that film.
Bingo.
Somebody knows
deliberate.
something. And it was deliberate. Call it a sort of brainwashing of the public, welcoming them into the new world of the old order. Questions? I saw a gentleman over here. Yes, speak loudly and clearly, and we'll try to repeat your question.
Tim, I came up to you yesterday at the talk, and I had some papers that and I asked you if you've gone to find the giants in the Solomon Islands. And I came across that in 2013. They're not bones, they're living. And they're locusts in Revelation chapter 9 are in the Solomon Islands. Are you going there with a machine gun?
If I go there with a machine gun, I'll be arrested promptly as soon as I land on the island, that's for sure.
The question, for those of you who are watching us, is these things are real, and should you protect yourself from them? Perhaps. Are they that real?
Well, I mean, the Solomon Islands is all kinds of strange things are coming out of the Solomon Islands. World War II, it was pivotal in World War II. That's where some of the bloodiest battles were fought in the Pacific against the Japanese. And according to legend, some of the Japanese were devoured as they moved across the islands by a race of giants. And these are Bigfoot-like giants. They have long hair. And there's all kinds of strange things associated with these beings. And then there's also the little ones. There's the little creatures running around, and there's all kinds of stuff out there. In terms of security, we always try and arrange security when we can. You can't always, because the gun laws, for example, in the Solomon Islands are extremely strict. But we try to be somewhat smart about the way we do things, but maybe a little reckless, but for your sake. But anyway, that's...
Okay, that's the comment on that. Oh, well, we have another question over here. Sir, what's your...
I just wanted to know, Steve Wood had mentioned several times last year about possibly some giants possibly escaping from Antarctica. There was several things coming out about that. I know you probably don't know a whole lot about those possible sources, private. Do you have any stories about what's going on in Antarctica?
Stories about the possibility of living giants, maybe in Antarctica, but maybe in the Middle East. We hear these stories and we wonder. Afghanistan. Who wants to address that question?
Let me just briefly, in Watchers 10, and we've been fooled. The fairy totally fooled us. So that's my, okay? But with the giant, just so you know, when this guy, the shooter, we call him a shooter, when he contacted us with this story, I was immediately skeptical. And that's how, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. I am really very skeptical. I will, if I hear a story, a good story, I will immediately jump and try to investigate it, but I try to verify it, trying to find out, where did you hear this? What evidence do you really have? So this shooter guy comes up to us and says that he was in Afghanistan in like 2002, 2001, right in that time frame. And he was out in the Kandahar province looking for high-value targets. That's what was going on, high-value targets. This is a really desolate area, no villages around. And according to his story, a platoon was let out. This is all in Watchers 10. A platoon was dropped off by a helicopter, and they missed their rally point. They missed their second rally point, third rally point. By the end of the day, it's like, okay, they've been captured, they're killed, what's going on? The next morning, 8:30, another helicopter drops another platoon in the same location. They're following the trail of the first platoon. They come around, they're way up in the mountains, they come around this like goat trail like this, and in front of them are what looks like pieces of radio equipment, and there's bones on the ground. And as they walk down further, there's pieces of flesh, and they come on this large ledge, thousands of feet up from the valley floor below, and above them is a cave. And out of the cave comes everyone's nightmare, a 12-footer. And we dumbed it down. He told us it was taller than 12 feet. So when you hear that, you go, well, that's a cool story. What kind of proof do you have? So I was in Ohio. I met with this guy. He showed me all of his cards, all of his clearances, his passport, everything. And he told me the story again. Every time when the giant comes out of the cave, they're all stunned like this. This guy, Dan, starts running at it with an automatic weapon, firing it and running towards the giant, firing his weapon like this. The giant moves with such speed and agility. And he's got this large pike, a spear in his hand, one hand. He's barefoot, long red hair, okay? Got a large spear in one hand, a shield in the other. And as Dan's running, firing up this thing, the giant skewers him and hoists him up like this. And Dan's like, writhing, holding a thing, but he's still alive. And the giant's coming after more. The shooter said at this point, when he tells the story, he breaks down and cries. The shooter starts crying. So, okay, that's kind of interesting. It's not crocodile tears. He's really upset by this. Having interviewed hundreds of people, looking at the body language, it's genuine, it's real. So to cut to the chase, someone yells, shoot him in the head, shoot him in the head. And they open fire on this guy. 308s, automatic weapons, the whole deal. They basically almost decapitate him, which is really interesting because from the jaw down, there's nothing there. They blow his lower part of his head up. Thing falls to the ground. Dan succumbs to his wounds. and they're just all stunned. They go up to the cave, where the cave was. Did they explore the cave? Don't know. The giant stunk to high heaven, had 6 fingers, 6 toes, and this raises a lot of questions. Was it 500 years old? Was it 1,000 years old? Was it 2,500 years old? Because this is fallen angel DNA mixed with human DNA, a true Nephilim, in my opinion. And there are others, because this was not the same giant that Steve talked about. And we got the shooter and the pilot together, and they talked, and it's different years. And then I had 2 people come up to me at 2 different conferences, active duty, telling me the same type of a story, different locations, different year, being called in. There's a pallet on the ground. There's something really large on it. It's biological. And the moment the chopper lands, they're given a promotion, and they're given a different security clearance. And I looked at the guy and I said, it was a giant, wasn't it? He just went. So there you go.
And by the way, we had a contact that told us this very similar story, but he was an AC-130 pilot. He went and picked up a body of a giant that had been killed in Afghanistan, but he picked it up in the Bagram Air Force Base. And he flew in, and very similar story, giant in a cave, but we know it was a different giant. Because our pilot, like L.A. said, talked to the guy that contacted him. And I don't know if you know this, I think maybe Steve told you. Our pilot, who we know personally, who came over to our studios, and we saw all of his credentials and everything, he told us that the guy that L.A. was talking to was telling the truth. Why? Because our pilot had withheld certain details of the story purposely to vet anybody who would come out and talk about anything like this. Wow. And he said that guy was telling the truth. So these are 2 separate giants. What's very interesting is that they're in the caves. Why they're in the caves? Because they're accessing the tunnels, the global underworld. If you've seen our films, we talk about the Shinkana, the global Shinkana beneath the earth, the tunnel systems, the cities, the whole mess that's underground. That's where these things live, and that's where their trafficking is, under the ground.
The Bible speaks of at least 4 different species of giants, L.A., and you and I have talked about this. You know, there are the long-necked giants, the Zamzumim, and there are the Rephaim, and there are the Zamim, and there are several different species of giants mentioned in the Bible as though they were real people in the days of Abraham, by the way. And here's what I wanted to float past you at this point in time. We read of Og of Bashan in the Bible. And Bashan is the area, the landmass just north and east of the Sea of Galilee and on up toward Syria. So if Og and his family got chased out and went to the northeast, maybe they ended up in Afghanistan.
I think it's a valid point. And again, when the shooter comes to us and then you piggyback that on, because Steve broke the story years before we had the shooter. And when we broke the story, even in Watchers 10, we kind of give kudos to Steve and Gen 6 because they were the first to break this story. And it sounds unbelievable, but wait, there's a second giant. We got the second giant, which begins to validate the whole deal. What's troubling to me is how old is this thing? How old is it? Is it, like I said, is it 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years old? When Joshua and Caleb, we know that there was a diaspora, and that's what we think settled in Peru. These entities fled the Levant. Some came up into North America. There's no doubt about it. The copper mines in North America, the dolmens that we just saw in Montana, which are still secret, these dolmens are just like, they're unbelievable. I just saw them last week. I contacted the person who's discovering it's all hush-hush. It's all on Native American land. These rocks go up like as high as the ceiling, and on top of these 2 huge rocks is a cross piece. Hello? You can't do that. And they're all over the Ohio Valley, the Great Circle Mound, I think Cahokia, the Great Circle Mound in Ohio, the Serpent Mound in Ohio. I call it Nephilim architecture because when the first white settlers got into the area, they asked the Native Americans, First Nation people, who did this? And the Native Americans said, we didn't, it was here when we got here. So this goes back thousands and thousands of years, and it's very troubling. And of course, all of this is under the radar, it's swept under the rug, it's a managed agenda, don't look over here. And if they find anything, I mean, if we find a 9 or 10 footer, and that's what we're looking for, we're trying to find a 9 or 10 footer, that changes everything. then how can they possibly backpedal? That would be the largest human skeleton ever found on the planet, and it's not human.
Darwinian evolution, and in a moment I'll take a question if you'll stand up, ma'am. Darwinian evolution has an agenda, the teaching of evolution. Man rising up from the apes and becoming who we are today, great and wonderful people. And any other narrative would destroy that theory. And so probably there is a battle, right, of the minds that's going on right now. And the battle is to see which version of history will win out, and keep plugging away, because we need to chip the cover off this thing. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Now, would you repeat the question, because I'm having trouble hearing?
Yeah, I am too, actually. So, but talking about, do these giants have supernatural powers? Do copper bullets stop them? Is that a way to, kill them? Is that close? Okay.
I've never shot one.
Yes, sir. We're gonna go on Nephilim hunting.
There's no question that depending on how much fallen angel DNA they have, they definitely have supernatural powers. What we would consider supernatural, but are really hypernatural powers. And that would range from supernatural strength to intelligence. And what I find interesting also is you have these instances where you have these barbaric, savage-type giants that come out of the caves. But then you have other instances where you hear stories of giants that are not at all savages, especially as they're related to the UFO phenomenon, that seem to be civilized, in fact, far more advanced than we are. So that does beg the question, is there this ancient savage group that goes all the way back to their dispersion at the hand of Joshua in the Promised Land? Are they still just under the ground living in colonies or something? But then you have these other groups that seem to be quite advanced. So it's a mixed bag. But yes, they have some of them have hyperdimensional powers. That's why I think the Bigfoot-type creatures are so hard to find. And the Solomon Islands, the giants there, are also associated with all kinds of strange phenomena, especially as it relates to Stargate-like travel.
And so you're talking about a connection between ufology and the giants of the
Exactly.
Bible. Now, folks, I'm sitting here, I'm a Bible teacher. I've read the Bible, I've taught the Bible, I've pastored for many years, and those words just came out of my mouth, ufology and giants. Wow. But this is the world we live in today. It is not your grandfather's world anymore. New things are popping open. This gentleman right here, if you could stand up and speak as loudly as possible.
Genesis 6, Nephilim. And we had the flood, and they showed up on the other side of the flood. Can you give me a logical, rational theory as to how that happened?
The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Moses is writing here, thousands of years after the flood. It's being dictated, or God is writing, or the angels are dictating, however it's working on Mount Sinai. So he says, Moses again is writing. The flood's way over here, Moses is writing from here. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, period, done, over. But that's not what it says. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God, he tells you exactly what happened, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men and had children by them. I mean, I don't understand why it's so controversial, because it's a seed war. Gary Stearman did a wonderful teaching on the seed war. The seed of the woman will be at enmity. The seed of a serpent will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. And there's no time limit on that. It's like, well, it's at 4 BC that war will stop. Nonsense, it's still going on. And I believe it's happening in modernity with the whole alien abduction hybridization program, which goes back to Daniel. Their seed will not, mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave, which is exactly what's happening. There's no marriage taken like in Genesis. They're not marrying the women. They're just taking sperm and ovum and creating what they want. And I realize that sounds absolutely wacky. But at my table for the last 2 days, the people that have come up and poured their hearts out, and this is what the pastors need to understand. We had one guy come up to me, never told anyone, not even his wife. And then he proceeded to tell me a story. This stuff is real. This stuff is real, and the church needs to talk about it.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I think for me, the issue is we believe in what you're doing. I don't know of anybody else that's going after the truth. And as a church, as a body of Christ, we're looking for this little bit of ray of hope to substantiate our position in the world. And I don't know if we're going to get it. It seems like there's somebody clandestinely hiding it from us.
Yes.
And you can't get access to it.
The gentleman is essentially talking about maybe an ongoing conspiracy to keep this thing quiet. He's saying, will this ever be broken? What do you think?
Well, I think the island of Sardinia is one of the best examples of a live, actionable cover-up that's happening right now. I liken the island of what's happening in Sardinia to the Smithsonian cover-up that happened in the 19th century, late 19th century in the United States. Right now, this very moment, they're very likely extracting the bodies of giants from what are called, from the megalithic towers in, I just forgot what they're called, in Sardinia. And while we were there, if you talk to the older generation in Sardinia, they're all going to tell you about giants. That when they were younger, back in the 60s, especially after World War II, when they had to rebuild a lot of the island because we blasted the heck out of it, or the Nazis did, they had to rebuild a lot of their infrastructure, and while they were doing that, they were digging up the bones of giants, routinely, everywhere. And the towers are called nuraghi. And there was over 30,000, some say over 50,000 megalithic towers on this one island, on the island of Sardinia. And associated with the megalithic towers are what are called to this day the tombs of the giants, massive megalithic tombs. And there are so many stories of the bodies that used to be in those tombs, 9, 10, 11, 12-foot bodies. So many people building, who were working on the roads or whatever for the government, dug up the bones of giants, encyclopedias. And people who are digging additions to their homes, gardening in their backyards, digging up six-fingered hands, hands that are this big. I mean, everywhere you go, people have stories about this. And a lot of people had the bones, they kept them, until the government began a systematic confiscation. And they went around taking them all. And the Catholic Church was right in the middle of this. In fact, in our film, Holocaust of Giants, there's a particular excavation that we document under the Church of Santa Anastasia in Sardara, on the island of Sardinia. And in this particular location, we talked to two different individuals who were hired by the municipality to dig up the bones. And they dug them up, and these guys worked on two separate occasions. They didn't work together. One worked earlier, and the other worked later on the same project. They both dug up several skeletons, some that were 9, some that were up to 12. And the bones went into the church. They would dig up the bones, and we're talking we're not just talking fragments, whole skeletons into the church. Next morning, gone. The other guy, into the church or into the churchyard. One guy put him in the church, the other guy laid him out in the churchyard. And he even told me Dr. Ugas came from the university in Sardinia on behalf of the government, came, inspected them, and took them away. And I mean, there's just, and that's why you've never heard about the nuraghi in Sardinia. 30,000 megalithic towers on one island. Who were they? They were the Canaanites. They were the Rephaim. I believe part of the ones that fled from Joshua, the promised land, made a stronghold on the island of Sardinia. They became the Phoenicians. And they propagated the race of Rephaim all over the earth. They came to the copper mines in the Great Lakes region and spread out all over through the Americas. And that's the fact. That's the historical fact that nobody has ever told.
You know, one of the things that interests me about the Rephaim, I noticed in the Hebrew language years ago that the word Rephaim, which is the common word for giants in the Old Testament, comes from the Hebrew Rapha. Rapha means sick or weak, weakened ones. And I wonder, why would you call a giant a weakened one? Because everywhere you see them, they're very strong. But the interpretation of Rephaim, weak or sickly giants, I think refers to the fact that they are an outlandish, ungodly creation. And Isaiah even says the Rephaim will never be resurrected. When they die, they will never again rise up. In other words, they are ineligible for resurrection. And I think that's why they are called the sick or the weak or dying ones, even though in real life they look very strong. And they were the champions of the old world, like Goliath was a Rephaim. David, I don't know how tall he was, probably a little taller than me. But Goliath, how tall would Goliath have been, L.A.?
I think Goliath was around 12 feet.
Okay.
Definitely over 9 feet.
I do too. I'd put him right at 12.
Yeah, 12 feet.
It's an actuality. It's in the Bible. And Goliath was an ungodly creation. He was ineligible for redemption. And that's the whole story.
I want to add one real quick story. I get stuff like this, and I track it down. This guy emails me, and he's like, really, he's elderly, not doing so well. When he was a little kid, he was on this island off the coast of Florida called Tick Island with his family. And they took home movies, 8mm movies. And guess what? They've got the 8mm movies. And guess what? He's going to send them to me because there might be, when he was a kid, they were out there digging and they dug up the bones of 9-footers. So I'm sitting here on pins and needles. He sends me the film. It's all 8mm. I put it to a place in Hollywood. They digitize everything. And I'm just like this. What we discovered was the mother had the camera. And the mother wasn't interested in the giants. However, there's one shot of an elongated skull. Greatly elongated skull that's there. The archaeologist is there, and they said, the giants are here, and they're like, I don't want to. So the archaeologist goes over here, and they uncover an elongated skull. And Tim was talking about the Holocaust of giants. The same thing in the Americas. The Smithsonian sent out teams of 2 people, and they gathered up the bones at the turn of the last century, 19th and the 20th century. I mean, it's a fact. And, what do we do with that? Why are they doing this? Because it proves the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative. And it also proves the supernatural. We can't have that in the Darwinian paradigm. That's what's at stake here. And that's what we're trying to do. 2 different teams, but we work together sometimes, like with the giant stuff. And we're both, fighting for the Lord. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Are there any other burning questions out there? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Stand up and speak as loudly as possible.
Anybody track down the northwest states like Washington, D.C., there's a giant
Bigfoot.
She's asking about Bigfoot. Remote. All right, let's bring up Bigfoot. Is Bigfoot real?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But it's probably very different than what most people think. But even in the jungle, there's a creature that's a Bigfoot-like creature, some sort of apish hominid, but it's smaller. But there seems to be a species of hominids that have something to do with the giants, with the race of Nephilim. And but there's definitely you have the Yeti up in the Asia. In that area, you have the Bigfoot creature. You have the Amazon Bigfoot creature, which is about 6.5 feet tall, smaller than the other ones. So we're not the only hominid species on the earth. And
we have a gentleman back here standing up. Speak as loudly as you can, please, and we'll repeat your question. All right.
The man earlier
All right.
We are protected.
Amen.
Good stuff.
And I have a question for you because referencing the gates of hell, the gentleman was asking the question about what is the Bible talking about when it's talking about the gates of hell? Well, in your DVD, you have a rather prominent gate featured in one of your DVDs, and which kind of is considered by the natives to be a transdimensional gate of sorts.
Aramamuru.
Okay, tell people about that.
Well, in Peru, there's a site, and I don't know, did you
I've
visit
been there, yeah.
Aramamuru? There's a place in Peru near Puno, near Lake Titicaca called Aramamuru. Now, that name is contrived because there was a shaman there that wanted to make more money on tourism and created this whole mythos about Aramamuru. He put the name Aramamuru because he gave it the name Aramamuru because he wanted to connect it to the mythical land of Mu, and he contrived this whole story about an Incan king or a survivor from Mu coming through that gate and what he considered to be a stargate. But there's traces of Indian mythos in this thing that he concocted, because we went and talked with the Aymara people in the village right there, right next to this alleged gate. And the Aymara people we talked to told us that yes, it has been legend to be a stargate, but not like that shaman guy concocted his story. But they told us that indeed people had seen entities going in and coming out of that alleged stargate. So they don't know who built it, and they don't know why. But if you go there today, you'll see all kinds of shamans doing ceremonial things in front of that gate, usually with tourists. And we did when we were there, but we did something that most people don't do. We camped out in front of it. And we paid dearly for that, what turned out to be a mistake, because that night, I was subjected to one of the worst storms I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the hail and the wind, and it was just absolutely.
We had some of that.
I don't know if it was coincidental or what, but we joked a lot about angering the gods that night. but yeah, we were just absolutely hammered out camping out in front of that thing. And by the way, the next day, the villagers had to come and help us push our van out of the mud. It sank into the mud, and that's in the film at the end of True Legends, the episode 1. And so on the way home, when we were driving back to Puno from that location, we were talking to the driver and asking him, "Did you guys get pounded in Puno like we did out here?" He said, "No." He said the weather, he was listening to the radio, and he said that storm was really weird because it really only hailed heavily right around Aramamuru and that village right next to it. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't see anything go in or come out. I just know that it was really cold and wet and a lot of hail.
We were at the Great Circle Mound in Ohio. I just walk into it. It's a beautiful sunny day. Out of nowhere comes a blizzard. We were at the Circle Mound in Ohio the first time I was ever there. We were speaking at a conference, right? All of a sudden, I come out of the conference, look up at the sky, and I go, that's a tornado sky. It's green, scalloped, the whole deal. So we drive down, So we drive down to the Circle Mound, and it looks like something out of Ghostbusters. There's this dark thing coming at us with these funnels going down like this. And I'm out there in the parking lot, the top of my lungs rebuking in the name of Jesus, right? We went up to a mound in Ohio, a separate incident, another mound. Beautiful sunny day, like early November. Beautiful sunny day. We get up on top of the mound, out of nowhere, this blizzard comes in. And I mean a blizzard. And we're sitting there, like with our coats, it's just coming down like crazy. The moment we get off the mountain, we're like 100 yards, the thing just stops. Sun comes out. You tell me what's going on.
By the way, when we were at Aramamuru, before we went to bed, there were a bunch of natives there with us. And I asked them, are you guys going to stick around? They said, no way. They took off. And there was like a shaman guy there ringing a little bell and stuff. And just the Aymara people, they don't even speak Spanish. They speak Aymara. They were with us, and some of them speak Spanish. And there was no way that they were going to stay after nightfall in that area.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're out of time. In fact, we're over time. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.